If we could somehow figure out how to make horse sports judged on the process, then we could really get horse welfare and the outcomes to align.
Matt Brown is a 5-star event rider, a coach, and a thoughtful voice in the sport. But the moment that changed how he rides didn't happen in competition. It happened afterward, in the quiet, watching a replay of a round he once felt proud of and seeing something different. A horse doing the job, yes, but not from trust, from pressure. In this episode, Matt opens up about the invisible weight so many riders carry, the fear of not being enough, the stories we inherit about control and worth, and the cost of trying to prove we belong. The whip became a symbol of something bigger. His decision to let it go marked the beginning of a deeper shift. This is a conversation about unraveling old defaults, naming quiet shame, and redefining partnership on new terms. Not to be perfect, but to be honest.
Dear Horse World, it's Matt Brown.
Matt, welcome to Dear Horse World podcast.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
I am so stoked that you're here.
I appreciate that.
Yes. Okay. So before we dive in, and I'm sure everyone who's pressed play on the episode knows why you're here. Maybe some who don't.
Mm-hmm.
But before we dive into the big topic at hand, I would love for you to talk about kind of why we're here. Mm-hmm. Because we just went and had lunch with Jim Masterson. That was really fun. And the way that you were able to explain why we're here in this moment in your life, it was really moving for me because I had not heard that from your lips before. Mm-hmm. So could you share with everyone what you share with Jim?
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of my story, right? Mm-hmm. So I grew up eventing. Love it. I mean, loved it from the first day I did it. And my wife came up in the hunter jumper worlds, and both of us at different times of our life got interested in natural horsemanship, and really enjoyed kind of integrating those approaches. And so that kind of led to us starting a business together, and Cecily helped me believe in myself enough to kind of go for it a little bit more in my career as far as having an Olympic, dream. And we were lucky enough to meet Bob and Valerie Fish, who are just amazing people.
It changed your life from the sounds of it.
Completely changed our lives. And, I'm not the type of person that asks people for things. And I didn't have to with Valerie. I just said to her, it was during the Olympics, and I said to her that, I've always had an Olympic goal, but I never really thought that I was good enough. But I kind of think that I might be able to do it. And just in a very honest way, she looked at me and she was like, well, why don't we do that? And it just kind of blew me away. And within a month, we were, in Ireland looking at horses. And so that kind of kicked Cecily and my lives into this.
It's like a crop
whole thing. Yes, absolutely. And so we ended up coming to the East Coast, kind of stepping away from the business that we had already grown in California, and kind of dove headfirst into the high performance world of eventing. And so there were a lot of big shocks during that time of my life for both of us. So first time living away from California, first time really kind of being playing at a high performance level. I had competed advanced when I was a kid, but I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I should not have competed at that level. I still should barely be competing at the level, honestly. But so kind of starting to kind of get into that world was very different. Having Bob and Valerie, who are very generous people, be willing to put money into me and into my goals was very daunting for me. I felt a lot of pressure to prove to them that their money wasn't, going to waste.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
And I mean, Cecily too, she was willing to uproot her life and move all the way across the country. So there was just a lot of things kind of riding on this crazy goal. And so we ended up, doing pretty well. And I was named alternate for the Rio Olympics and alternate for the Pan Am Games that was just before the Rio Olympics. Toronto. I forget where that one was. But
I think you're right though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was amazing. And I remember getting the call saying that I was an alternate and then calling Bob and Valerie because they were still on the West Coast. And they were thrilled. They were just like, we did it. Hooray. And I was like devastated. I've always felt like a very resilient person. I'm like a pretty tough person. And I just kind of spiraled after that. And the horse that was an alternate got injured. And so it just was a really tough time. And so it just kind of made us, both of us, reevaluate why we're doing what we're doing. Because putting the goal on the Olympics took the focus away from, didn't completely take the focus away from the horses, but it kind of did. If the goal was the Olympics, then the goal was the Olympics. And yes, in order to get there, I have to try to develop the horses as best I can. And I don't think we're the type of people to cut corners. But looking back, there's a lot that I would do differently now. But now we're in a very comfortable place. And so it's easy to look back and judge based on this comfortable seat that we're sitting in now. And there it just felt like everything was on the line. And so around that time it was 2017 where I rode my horse Super Sox, Bob and Valerie's horse, Super Sox, at Kentucky. And we were the top place Americans after cross country. Had a rail down in show jumping, so I think we finished 6th. So it was probably my best performance to date. But on cross country, at the time I didn't feel like this, but looking back at the video soon afterwards, I really felt like I was overusing the crop or the whip.
Yeah.
I never used it outside of the rules. So the rule is 2 times per use. And so I never, hit Flaxen is Super Sox bar name, 3 times in a row. But he used to be very ditchy, very kind of nervous of ditches, and down banks into water used to make him nervous. But he had been over that for a long time and I knew it. But I was nervous and I knew that if I made time, we would move up substantially. And so thinking about Bob and Valerie and moving across the country and just wanting to be gritty and like get it done. I mean, that's the eventing thing, right? Looking back, I just wasn't very proud of the ride. And so we just started thinking even more about, number one, why are we doing this? And how I got close to the Olympics. That was probably the most unfulfilled in my life I had ever felt. And the pressure that I put on myself to get there meant that I was doing things in a way that probably wasn't the best for me or the horses. Got me to the place mentally where I had to go to a psychiatrist, and got the horses to a place where, I was, what I felt like was overusing the whip to get them around when, like, he didn't need me to. And so that kind of brought me to writing about the use of the whip and wanting to kind of look at the rules and if my ride was well within the rules, that, probably, in my opinion, and that the rule probably needs to change. But I think just on a deeper level, like I think culturally, like we're taught to never get on and go cross country without the whip.
Right.
And so just rethinking that sort of thing, I'm not against using whips. I still ride with whips, but I really had to reevaluate why I was using it. And even after writing the article and getting a lot of feedback, some people have brought up points that I just had never thought about why they use it. And so that made me kind of think even more about, well, I didn't think about it that way. So that's kind of the story behind the story.
So before we dive into your article and your proposal, like the question that you're putting to the horse world, which I think is an important one, right? We always need to take stock where we're at. And I think everyone who listens to this podcast knows my stance on, I think the horse world needs to be really encouraging of, and we had this conversation with Harry Charles in the studio. It's like, let's ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's propose things that are different. Let's encourage inquiry. Let's not discourage it.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about the pressure, because I think everyone who's listening or watching this episode is going to really appreciate the candor that you have about what it feels like to experience the kind of pressure at the high performance level and the way that it informs some of the decisions that we make
Mm-hmm.
at that level.
Mm-hmm.
So you said something that really stuck with me, which was what you saw and how it felt at that level wasn't what you expected.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
The greatest horse statement ever.
Yes. And for me, what changed about my focus when we kind of started going down that road with Bob and Valerie was I never was like that big of a goal setting person. I just kind of go with the flow, Northern California person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first like big goal that I ever like actually committed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was committed to the horses from when I could walk, so that never really felt like a decision that I made. So this was the first like kind of big goal that I was gonna go for. So for me, that's kind of where it started, was all of a sudden I had this external focus and the Olympics was the thing and not what was going on in order to get there. Not that we did anything horrible. I don't want to make it sound like we were like, drugging horses or anything. But so I think that's where it started to go wrong, was starting to focus more on the outcome
And not
and ignoring how it felt. Ignoring how I felt, ignoring how it made the team around us feel, having to more and more just kind of put on a face than be honest, because it kind of felt like that's what I needed to do in order to like be on the radar.
Oh.
And like,
yeah.
And like play the game kind of, like, oh, what do they want and how can I show them that?
Yeah.
Rather than how can I be the best that I can be? Because if I'm the best that I can be, then they're going to put me on a team. And so it just kind of, everything got really external and became about the pressure of just getting that outcome. And I started to see really clearly where that could go. And there's one example when Super Sox was dealing with some soundness issues. Someone had mentioned to me, so he had a bone bruise in his foot. During that ride in Kentucky, he pulled a shoe and ended up getting some bone bruising. Someone mentioned to me that I could have him nerved. And I was like, I don't think that's legal.
Mm.
But they knew other horses that were nerved in the industry and still competing and stuff like that. And in my mind, I was like, don't I owe it to Bob and Valerie to like do everything I can to
honor
get us there?
Because
at that point, Flaxen's career was in question.
Wow.
And so that meant that my career was in question, meant that everything that they and we had sacrificed and done to. And I'll never forget the phone call that I had with Bob. And I just remembered this now, talking about phone calls. But Bob and Valerie are deeply religious people, and we're different in that regard. But like I always tell Valerie, like I have a lot of belief, just slightly different than the way that she does. So they're very principled. And to me, this question of, should I do something like nerving him? And it was a very complicated question in my mind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't complicated for Bob at all. Bob was like, we have certain values, and whenever we're faced with, a question of, do we go this direction or that direction, we just compare it to our values. And if it goes against our values, then we just don't do it. And it was just like, oh, you mean making that decision can be that easy? I don't have to like kill myself over going back and forth about whether I should do something like this or not. And that was really like a big turning point for Cecily and I, because we both have pretty strong values, and horsemanship is really important to us, and the horses are very important to us. And that made it so much easier for us to just be like, well, yeah, these are our values. And if we're not living by that, whether we get to the outcome or not, like we're not going to be happy about it. And so I just was so grateful that Bob just kind of broke through all the...
Well, it's like you shatter through the glass, right?
Absolutely.
It's like this, when someone does that, they just shatter through the facade that you think exists.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden... Because what you're speaking to is something that we know, both you and I know, is ever present, which is, I really want this outcome. I have these values. What happens when the outcome and the values are in contradiction to one another? And that's what happens when we see things in the horse world that either the person's ashamed of or the industry as a whole is ashamed of, because the values that we have as a collective, which are ever changing, and that's why we're sitting here in the studio right now, is because I think the values of the collective are actually changing at such a rapid rate that some of our organizing bodies, some of the regulatory minds that are spending their time figuring out what boundaries exist for us, I think they're actually trying to catch up as best they can. And I think it's a time in which things are changing almost on a daily, weekly, monthly rate. And that's scary for everyone, right?
Scary, yeah.
So what it requires is real-time honesty, which, what I'm really grateful to have this conversation with you about is, okay, do we have a culture that encourages honesty with self and honesty with everybody else? Do we have a culture within our sports, within our industry as a whole, where we're saying, yes, please speak up? And this is what Harry and I talked about was, did you feel supported when you said, I do not feel this is safe?
Right.
I do not feel this is in the best interest of the horse.
Yeah.
And do you feel supported or do you feel ostracized when you speak up?
Yep.
And you said something really powerful, which I'm so grateful you have the clarity on, because we talked about being unplugged by the matrix, and I'm really excited to dive into that with you. So why is it that you feel, what is it about now that you feel capacity to not only look back on decisions that you've made and say, hey, maybe I didn't, knowing what I know now, maybe I wouldn't make the same decision, or I wouldn't ride the same way, or what has changed in your life that has allowed you to have that perspective and feel safe? And this is really important, and I'm going to emphasize this word, that you feel safe to not only be self-reflective, but then also to communicate that self-reflection to the industry as a whole.
Yeah. I think two things really obviously, like, immediately come to mind. One is my wife, Cecily, and Bob and Valerie, um, because we were just intimately involved in this process together.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had the confidence to go for the goals that I have riding wise if it wasn't for Cecily and feeling like she believed in what I could do. Same thing with Bob and Valerie. I needed them to believe that I could do it in order for me to believe that I could do it, sort of thing. And the self-reflection piece, I think, is one really good thing that I learned through the high performance process, is that you have to be willing to look at your flaws and work on them. And boy, that is not easy.
Nope.
And Cecily helps me a lot with that. I'm not grateful for it every day. But I am, because she's very tactful usually in how she helps me through that. But I think the other thing too is just our position financially and stuff now is very different than it was in 2017 when we had given up our business in California. Bob and Valerie had given us a loan so that we could survive during our move from the West Coast to the East Coast. So everything felt very much on the edge. And as much as anybody in the horse world cannot live on the edge, like, we're still a little bit on the edge, but way more in a much more stable place financially with our living situation, probably our age, my age anyways. I'm just feeling like everything else is less at risk. And so, because it just feels a bit risky when you're relying on the industry. And maybe I'm not criticizing the industry, but when you start asking why, like, it's an intimidating question.
Yeah.
And it was intimidating for me personally and for Cecily and I both in our lives. And it's intimidating asking why about, an industry.
Yeah.
Because we got to where we are because of all of the things that this industry has built that are great and I love. And, I love the grit of cross country. I love the aggressiveness of cross country. I love, like, that part of me is like, oh, I love it. But, I think when it comes to how we feel every day, how the horses feel every day, that's a process, and that's what's happening every day.
Yes.
And sport is about outcome.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of the things that we've been asking ourselves the last couple of years is, I want to be involved in the sport. I still want to play at a high performance level. I still would love to go to the Olympics. But how do we do that when our values and our primary goals aren't that? And so for ourselves, we had to come up with, what are the things that we're willing to sacrifice and what are the things that we're not willing to sacrifice for those outcomes?
Well, and I think it starts to, what it makes me think of is when you have a goal and you're willing, people say, I will do anything to get to this place.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder whether when that person gets to that place, if they sacrificed their morals and their values, which is, I think, the sort of like spiritual or moral infrastructure that makes up who we are as a person, how we move through the world.
Yeah.
If you sacrifice that, then when you get to that goal, when you get to that outcome, I would be really curious to ask that person, how does it feel?
Yeah.
Does it feel as good as you hoped that it would?
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen so many athletes that when their main identity, which is to go to the Olympics or be a high performance athlete, and when they retire, they really struggle with their self-identity.
Yeah.
Because that was their self-identity.
Well, and it's a lot. Like, you have, in order to compete at that level, and push yourself, like, it has to be an everyday thing. You constantly have to be thinking about it. And so it is very easy to have that just take over. And And I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of high performance athletes, not just riders, who don't have that experience, who don't feel like they have to sacrifice something in order to, compete at that level. And I think obviously that's very healthy.
Yes.
But I think it's very easy that degree of focus and pressure, it's very easy that goes in a very unhealthy direction. And, when you watch just like Simone Biles at the Olympics,
yes,
and her making the decision to just stop.
Yeah.
And
how upset people were.
Yeah.
That how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you?
One of the best Olympians of all time, probably one of the strongest, most competitive
athlete
to
ever go to the Olympic Games.
Yes.
And the response was, how dare you prioritize your mental health over your performance?
And that made her weak.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, that's the strength that it took her to do that probably was stronger than what it took for her to actually compete at that level.
Yeah. And that's so important that you bring this up, because we talked before about being internally and externally resourced, right? And when we go for a goal and when there's so many stakeholders at play. So when you're going to the Olympics, you have a ton of people's opinions, values, money, resources that are going into your goal, the outcome that all of you are striving towards.
Yeah.
You were talking about how you felt more and more externally resourced than internally resourced. And I think this is really important, because this plays into a very, very important element at play within equine sport that I want to identify, which is when you're a rider, let's say when you're a high performance athlete and you have sponsors and you have owners, and you even talked about even owning your own property, you maybe even are a guest where you have your horses.
Yep.
Can you explain to everybody what the feeling is like if you want to speak up or stand up or say something that might go against everybody else's opinions, values, resources, but it doesn't go against your own? You want to speak up for something that doesn't feel good for you. Do you or do you not feel empowered in that, being able to do that?
I mean, it's a very easy answer. You don't. You don't. If you don't have the resources to do it by yourself, you cannot afford to alienate anyone.
Right.
And that is, it means that you are constantly thinking about what everybody else wants and how do you keep everybody else happy. And I'm sure it happens in, other areas of life also when you don't have the resources. And so I think that's why a lot of people get pushed out of the sport, because, again, it's kind of easily to be an unhealthy place to live in, and I think that's difficult for the industry across the board, is that there's a lot of people that are barely making it and are sacrificing a lot to be where they're at. And when you're sacrificing a lot, you just have to kind of put your head down and keep going to work every day and do the best you can with what you have and try to make people happy. And if you can't make them happy, then okay, you just have to, step away and move on to, a different property or find a different owner or, whatever. But your primary goal has to be, what can I do to make people interested in what I'm doing and keep them interested in what I'm doing?
So there's a level, and so what you describe is, to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, but what you describe is you objectify yourself. You become subject to objectification. And it's something that I think it's like a little bit the underbelly of equestrian sport that people don't. We talked about objectification of the horse, and that is ever prevalent. And that is a big point of discussion right now.
Yeah.
But one of the main, and Dewey Freeman, who's come on this podcast, this is a really important piece psychologically. We objectify others when we objectify ourselves. So when you become a commodity, and this is the underbelly that all of us who, think of all the people out there, everyone who's listening, think about all those riders that we all watch on social media, everyone who's at the Olympic level, who's everyone going to the World Equestrian Games, who's competing on the big leagues, right? their world, their life looks glitzy and glam. Like they're doing everything that the most of the horse world would love to do.
Yeah.
But I think what isn't shown is, one, what it takes to get there, and the sacrifices that are undertaken to do that.
Yep.
The objectification of that person, because you no longer, you're in some situations, and we both know those situations and you've experienced those situations, you are no longer a person.
Oh, I mean, these people over here, they're my owners. We don't say that's the horse's owners. Usually we just say, those are my owners. They own me. And that's not what we mean, but
But
I
is
think
that what it feels like?
that's kind of the mindset that you have to have. Like, if these people are putting in the money to back you, then you're representing them, and so you're not really representing yourself anymore. You have to be representing them, which it's not necessarily a bad thing, because you need the resources.
Yes.
And maybe they need what you can give them.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they want to be involved in the Olympics and never had the chance to, and this is their chance to participate in something like that and be a part of it. So I don't necessarily think that it's needs to be a bad thing, but from the rider's perspective, or the sponsored person's perspective, what you have to focus on a daily basis is very much what other people's needs are.
Right. So you're externally resourced.
Yeah.
And when we talk about, and so I want to ask you, because I think your eloquence and your self-reflection is your superpower. And often, and this is something that I think is really important to name, is that often our superpowers are the things that the world, sometimes the horse world, but the horse world is just a reflection of the world in a lot of ways. The world will often try to take it away from you. So if you're super sensitive, people will tell you as you grow up, you're just so sensitive. Or if you ask lots of questions, oh my God, just stop asking so many questions.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows, and I love when you talked about why.
Mm-hmm.
The question why is a very irritating question for a lot of people.
Very irritating, yes.
Because it asks them to dig deeper. You don't just get to answer that why question on a superficial level.
Yeah.
You got to dig deeper. And that person may or may not want to do that.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So I want you to explain, can you describe to everybody what the feeling is like? And we've all felt this way. And we said this at lunch. Like, I don't know anyone in the horse world who can say that they are shame-free or guilt-free of doing something or making a decision in their horsemanship that they wish they didn't.
Yeah.
Can you describe what it feels like when you look back and watch the Kentucky ride, or when you think of moments in which you feel like you compromised your values?
Mm-hmm.
What does it feel like when you do that? What does it feel like in your body?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll say the moment that I got the call that I was an alternate for the Olympics, and I already didn't feel good about my ride. I was trying to feel good about my ride. I was proud of the fact that we finished sixth. I was proud of the fact that we were top placed American after cross country. That was incredible. And I still feel great about that.
Yeah.
But it just felt like, I mean, I guess it's what depression feels like. It just felt like a rock. It just felt like, how do I keep going? Like, where are we going? How are we getting through this? And so it just felt like, I had this one goal, and now potentially that one goal is gone. It's taken so much to get to this one point, and that might be it. And boy, if that's it, I was really wrong to go after this, because this is not what I was looking for. I wanted to be a part of something. I love the Olympic ideal. I love pushing myself. Sometimes I don't love putting myself out there all the time, but I do like putting myself out there because it's a challenge, and I like challenging myself. But it just kind of stops you in your tracks.
Have you ever heard what depression, what it represents?
Mm-mm.
I love this description. So depression is your body, your soul needing deep rest from the person that you have been pretending to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I heard that, it was like whacked me in the face
Yeah.
because it made so much sense.
Yeah.
That deep rest means you need deep rest from the person that you have been pretending to be.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense. The thing that I guess is amazing to me now, I wouldn't have always said that this was amazing, but the thing that is amazing to me now is realizing that I don't think I needed to go through that. I don't think I needed to sacrifice. I don't think I needed to feel like, because nobody was making me sacrifice my values. I was putting myself in that position. And I absolutely own that. Like, if I did anything that went against my values or wasn't good for my team, or if I wasn't treating my team well or treating the horses well, like, yeah, I put myself in that position. But looking back and realizing that, we could have gotten there without feeling the need to sacrifice any of those things. Like, had I been focused on the process and yes, had the Olympic goal and yes, been pushing for it, but been doing that through the lens of our values and knowing that we could get there through those values, not despite those values.
Yeah.
Because I honestly believe that it can be done that way. I do think that you can be a very good horseman and still be competitive.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the easiest way to do it or the quickest way to do it, but I think it's possible. But the thing that you have to come to terms with is that because it's sport, you're going to want to be focused on the outcome. And everybody is going to see the outcome.
Yeah.
And
no one's going to see the journey.
No one's going to see the process. And that's one thing that I find really amazing about the road to the horse. Because it's a competition, but you're watching the process.
Yes.
So you're being judged on the process. And if we could somehow figure out how to make horse sports judged on the process, then we could really get horse welfare and the outcomes to align.
Yes. Amen.
So, but that's the problem for horse sport, is because welfare is a process issue. That's how the horses feel on a daily basis. That's how we feel on a daily basis. We could get the outcome and feel horrible and have the horses feel horrible, but still win. That's very possible. Plenty of riders do it. But I also think there's plenty of riders who do it who haven't sacrificed those same things and are developing happy horses who really want to be out there. I mean, for me, this year I competed at Kentucky again with a horse named Alderwood, Dan, in the barn. And I made a commitment to Dan early on because he didn't have the best start to life, and is sensitive, that, he and I were going to do as much as we could together, but that I wasn't ever going to ask anything of him that he didn't feel like he wanted to give me. And so then I was committed to not carrying a whip, and so I haven't carried a whip with him for the last year or so. And not that I still use whips, and I still think that they're good training aids when used appropriately. After Kentucky 2017, I didn't trust that I could have all the pressure of wanting the outcome and still use the whip appropriately. And so I didn't want to give myself that tool. I like to think that now I know a lot better, and so I don't use the whip in the same way. But so I didn't carry the whip. And at first I was like, the whip is like your Linus blanket. Like, you just feel like you can't go anywhere without it. And growing up, that's, as an eventer, at least, that's what you're told, is that you should not go out on cross country without a whip.
Yeah. It's ingrained in you.
Absolutely.
part of the culture.
Yeah.
And when you look at those tracks, and I want to just remind everyone as you're listening to this, when you look at the tracks at Burley in Kentucky, at all the big badminton, at the Olympics, these are monster tracks.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You're going in there, you want to have all the tools that you've been trained to believe that you need in order to psychologically tackle what you're about to tackle.
Absolutely. And if Alderwood wasn't the horse that he is a cross-country horse.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I can't be in his head. It seems to me that he loves it. And maybe if he wasn't that horse, I wouldn't have been able to get away with riding around the track without the whip. And we didn't finish. He stumbled going into the water and I fell off and we both got very wet. So that was unfortunate, but it had nothing to do with whether I was holding the whip or not.
Yeah.
But so he really wants to go out and do it. And so I kind of knew that I don't need it with him.
Yeah.
But I also know, looking back, that I also didn't need it with Fluxen, even though at the time I thought I did.
Right.
And so, I think talking about there are very different horses involved in eventing now than used to be involved in eventing.
Yeah.
Much more warm bloods. And Dan has the thoroughbred mindset. And with that type of horse, as soon as they know the job, you just are going to sit back. Like, you don't need to encourage them at all. But maybe with a heavier minded horse or a less aggressive minded horse, there's probably a place where you would want to have the whip on cross country.
Right.
For me, though, if I'm competing at that level, now at least at my age, not that I'm old, but I don't know if I'd want to go out on that horse.
See, and that's such an interesting, and this is what I feel really compelled to identify or name in this conversation, that you're having your internal process and your internal conversation, you're sharing with all of us. And that takes a lot of strength of character. You need to really know who you are in that moment. And when we had lunch, I said to you, shame and guilt is the price you pay for perspective. And for all of us who sit there and look back at something and say, God, I wish I could have done better.
Right.
So first of all, you're not looking away.
Right.
Right. So first of all, you're brave enough to look and say, could I have done better? Yes. Could I go back and relive that experience? Yes. And then what do I feel in that moment? Do I feel guilt? Do I feel shame?
Yeah.
Do I feel frustration, disappointed in myself, right? Those are difficult emotions to process.
Yeah.
They require a certain amount. You need to be internally resourced.
They require a certain amount of money for psychiatrists is what it requires.
Right. So you need to be able to be held through that process, right? And I think that I have not met one person, not one horsewoman or one horseman in this industry that I respect that doesn't look at me across the table and say, Noelle, then I wish I'd done better. And and I feel so ashamed for the thing that I did.
Yeah.
And I'm actually afraid of the people who sit there and go, I've never done anything that I'm ashamed of.
Right.
I'm like, really?
Right.
And so I really appreciate, and everyone in the industry knows I'm someone, I believe in healthy discourse. I think if our industry fails to have conversation, healthy discourse, in which one side is blatantly against the other and we cannot come together and have discussion, then the due process of what is allowed to become as a sport, as an industry, as a culture, it dies. Because if you cannot ask questions, then this isn't a culture.
Yep.
This isn't an industry. That's a cult.
Right.
That's an unhealthy form of religion or indoctrination, right? We must. I think that it's a really powerful thing that you are having your questions that you ask yourself and you're having them publicly and you're openly asking those questions.
Well, and I think, the why question is a hard question to ask and it's a hard question to be asked.
Yes.
And I certainly think I mean, not just with like the horses and stuff, but just how I write or how Cecily and I write. And I mean, this whip article, I look back and I'm like, I could have worded things a lot better. And, so the conversation isn't going to be a perfect conversation.
It never will.
But I think any conversation about the sport and the direction of the sport and doing better for the horses, but also doing better for riders. Because knowing for myself and knowing for a lot of the students that we've worked with, there's just been a lot of stuff that hasn't been good for them just as much as the horses. So I think I agree that it's important to have those conversations, knowing that it's going to be messy. And I understand the criticism of you don't want your mess to be out in the public. Like you want to present to the world this happy, shiny, smiling face. And especially in today's social media age where people aren't going to see the process.
Yeah.
They're going to see snippets. If they're going to see a snippet, you want them to see a good snippet.
Right.
Because they're going to walk away from that, and that might be the only snippet they ever see. And so I completely understand the challenge of we need to be able to present our best. How do we do that without also talking about the things that aren't the best? I think there are things that absolutely need to change. And having a whip or not having a whip probably doesn't matter, really. It's more how we use it. It's just like everything.
And the mentality
behind it. Absolutely. And I think the mentality behind how the whip is used, I think is the thing that we have to question. Because other people are going to question it. But not just that, but because we should also question it for ourselves and for our horses. And I think that while equestrian sports have a lot of outside pressure, there is also inside pressure. Like, I'm not saying the things that I say about things I see that I would like to have change because I'm an outsider. I see what the outsiders are worried about, but I also see what I'm worried about as an insider. And I think it would be great if us who are on the inside can have some conversations proactively about not just what the outsiders, not just how we're viewed, because we want to be viewed in a certain way desperately. And I think it's possible that we can make ourselves be viewed that way, but I think it can't be on a superficial level.
Right.
It can't just be, here's the face that we're pointing outwards, but you don't want to look behind that. It has to be like, come in, like David has talked about, just having an open barn policy. Anybody can come in and watch me train.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the way that it has to happen, is that we have to be open enough about our process and confident enough in our process to just let it be out there, knowing that it's not going to be a big smiley face all the time, that it might be kind of messy, and not be afraid of that. Because I think if we're honest about it, I don't think we need to be afraid of it. It's if we try to just protect it for the sake of protecting it, because it has gotten us to where we are, and where we are is great in a lot of ways, and I wouldn't want to change that. But it doesn't mean we're perfect.
No.
And so I think that there's a lot of changes that if we were willing to look at how we could do it in a proactive way, I think would really benefit the sport.
I love it. You say, talk about the open barn policy. It reminds me of the conversation I had with William Fox Pitt about congruency, about how our insides match our outsides and our outsides match our insides. Yeah. And if we were to truly honor, if this industry as a whole, we're going to truly honor the horse and inform the way that we exist and evolve as an industry by being inspired by the way the horse moves through the world. Horses are congruent by nature. So their insides match their outsides match their insides when they feel safe to do so, right? So a congruent horse, and that's why I think some people, horses really respond well to and some don't. I think is that a lot of it has to do with congruency. And that was what William Fox Pitt and I talked about.
Yeah.
Was when you have that congruency, it's because everyone's being honest and open.
Yeah.
Either verbally or non-verbally, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So something that I've noticed happens, and I'm curious if you've experienced this, is when you stand up and say something, especially when you ask why, there's a certain amount of character assassination, or there's a certain amount of personal attack that you receive. So it doesn't become about what you're asking, it becomes about who you are as a person. And the reason why I bring this up is because a fair few people who I really respect in the industry have basically said, I would love to stand up and say something, but I know that I will be personally attacked, that my character will be the target of discussion, not what I'm standing up for.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that overwhelmingly the response is positive when I talk about sort of things that I have personally dealt with or situations that I am kind of questioning. I try to do it in as humble a way as possible, but that's not always how it's taken. And I certainly can do a better job of that sometimes, because I feel strongly about the things that I think about. And I think, so for me, I have to continue to try to be as humble as possible when I'm putting things out there like that, because I don't have all the answers. But when you're doing that and looking at yourself, not just the industry, because I think if we're not looking at ourselves and just looking at the industry, we're not being honest.
Oh.
So I think it has to start with us. But then other people are going to use that against you, right? Like, oh, you think you're better than everybody else just because you've had this epiphany? No, because you've had the epiphany, you're better. And you don't need to carry the whip around cross country, so that makes you better than us. And boy, I mean, I get that. And I, as much as I can, I try to be clear that, like, this is how I feel. And for me personally, this is the direction that I want to go in. And I think it could be helpful for some people if I'm talking about my process. And yes, I have opinions about where I think the sport should go, but I'm open to those being the wrong opinion. Like, at least I like to think I am.
Well, we try, right? We try to remain open as much as we possibly can, and we're still human.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I do think that it's hard to put your faults out there because people are sometimes just gonna continue to point those faults out to you. Like, how can you now be pointing at all of these other people who have these faults when you had those faults? But that's kind of the point, is pointing out the fact that, yes, we all have these faults, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to do better. And if me pointing out my faults can hopefully help somebody else not have to go through that same issue, not have to learn it on their own, great. And they're going to have other faults. But maybe they don't have to have the ones that I had, and so if we can just do a little bit better than, the person that came before us, I really think that it's probably the next generation of horse people that are really going to have an impact. I mean, you said so at lunch also, because I think we're kind of at a crossroads right now.
Well, I think we're in this messy middle.
And
I think as soon as as we as a collective, as soon as we embrace that, and that we don't, I think right now we're very focused on the outcome. Right. So we cannot get removed from the Olympics. If that happens, the world will end. Yeah. And that's being externally resourced, right? Can we, as an industry and as a collective, as in a group, can we actually, like you said, be progressive? And can we have a conversation about how do we actually want to move forward? Yeah. And removing all outcomes, right? And it's really like, it's very prevalent about how focused we are on the outcome right now. And so we cannot admit that we're in the messy middle, but we are in the messy middle. And in the messy middle, and we've even talked about this in skill acquisition, The messy middle is a very science-backed, true element to evolution, to
That's
acquiring
where you wanna
skills.
be.
Yes.
It's where you should want to be.
And it's in where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I worry that the industry is going to rob itself
Mm-hmm.
of this incredibly evolved future.
Yeah.
If it cannot remove all agendas.
Well, and I mean, it really is similar to as a rider when you're trying to get sponsorship. Like, you have to sell yourself, and you can't afford to be putting your flaws out there when you're trying to sell yourself.
Right.
And that's kind of what it feels like the moment that this industry is in, is that there's an overwhelming feeling that we cannot allow our flaws to be out there.
Yeah.
Because we're in a moment where we have to be selling ourselves in order to stay relevant when it comes to the Olympics or sport or anything. And I don't necessarily think that that pressure is wrong. I think that's probably right. But I don't think horse sports are going to survive that.
Right.
I don't think that's going to work. So I think that if right now, before we get to that place, we could start to actually go a little bit more internal and kind of go to that, not be afraid of going to that middle place. I think ultimately, in my opinion, that's what's going to save horse sports, because horse sports have so much to offer the world.
Yes.
I mean, to us personally, to the horses,
Yes.
there's no other sport where you have an interspecies communication the way that we have it with the horses. And that is, it's crazy. I mean, it's dumb that we're capable of having this communication with
It's
with animals on this level. Yeah. And yes, maybe that gets a little woo-woo, but that's why we ride horses,
Matt,
because it's woo-woo.
I can promise you that one thing I can tell you with complete and total, utter, confidence is that more people in the horse world are woo-woo than ever before. Mm-hmm. And this weekend at the neuroscience clinic with Mark Rashid and Dr. Steve Peters and Jim Masterson, a lady described what the definition of woo-woo is, what she's heard it, which is wisdom openly observed. And I really liked that, right? And so but what I can tell you for sure is that I've talked to high performance, I've talked to over here, equine therapy, high performance, everyone in the middle, people who believe all use is abuse, people who believe that, we need to be, I don't know, all bits are okay, right? Everybody. And one thing that is consistent is that 2025, I believe there are more people who are openly starting to embrace their woo-woo, because, like you said, that's why we do it. Because if you were to do a sport in which the closest representation in popular media would be Avatar, where you connect and that horse feels your thoughts and understands your intention, and you can feel and understand your horse's intention. If that is what your apex goal is, and I know that there are Olympians whose apex goal is that, right? So to say that doesn't exist at high performance, I agree with you that there are people who fundamentally want that sacred spiritual connection. They just happen to find their platform for that is at the Olympic Games. But if that's your apex, then I don't know what you are if you're not woo-woo. Right? If you weren't woo-woo, go drive a NASCAR.
Right. Yeah. And flow was woo-woo a decade ago.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I mean, everybody is all about flow now.
Yeah.
As an athlete, if you're not trying to reach for your flow, and talk about woo-woo.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm from Northern California, so I love woo-woo, but I just realized that not everybody does.
Yeah. I think more people actually are feeling that and feeling connected to that in the industry than ever before. And I think that I do wonder whether this right now, the generation that we're in, and that's just the price we pay. That's everyone, is it's just, that's what the universe is asking of us, is that we have this deep moral conversation about what direction, and that's the responsibility that has been laid upon our shoulders. People who are stakeholders and who are influencers, or who are people involved in the conversation that's at play at the moment within the industry, is that is the responsibility that has been put on our shoulders. That it is up to us to decide how we mean to go forward.
Yeah.
And then the next generation will either pick up a very lovely, wonderful gift that we've given them, or they're going to have to continue to exist in the messy middle.
Yeah.
And I think that I love that we're talking about being in the messy middle, because I think that's, your article, the response to your article, the questions that you're asking, what I think is profound and what I love about being in an industry in which we have the modalities and the avenues in order to ask questions, is that you doing that has an effect on someone else that you don't know. Right. That it's apathy is our greatest enemy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's when we don't care, and we can't ask everyone to come to the table and want to have a conversation, because like we talked about at lunch, like some people are just not willing to have that conversation.
Yeah.
They may still have those limiting beliefs about, and they might be in positions in which they genuinely feel disempowered.
Right.
And we know those people.
Yeah.
And we see you and we recognize that is your process. And for everyone who is able to stand up and speak up, it's an important part of the moment that we're in as an industry.
Well, and I, for myself, and just hearing what you have to say about that, I just go back to my phone call with Bob when I was so confused, and it seemed like in my head there's 100 different pressures coming from different areas, and it seemed like a very complicated thing to try to solve. And Bob just split through all of that, and because of their faith, he said, it's pretty simple actually. There's these things that we live by, and we just judge everything against those things. And I think if we as a horse community could come together and agree that on the details, we're probably not all going to agree, but if we could agree on a set of values, then certainly it would be much less complicated to exist in a sporting world where the outcome is really what is going to be judged, because we'll have these values that all of us have agreed are what we want to be living by, and that we're going to be judging that outcome, or at least ourselves, we will be judging as a community the outcomes based on those values, not just on who got the win. And so, that's where the decision for me became so much easier. And I think if we can sort of come at it from Bob's point of view, I think that we can make it much simpler than it needs to be, because we don't need to agree on all of the details.
Right.
We just need to agree on the values.
Just going to take a pause, because it's really powerful, the clarity of which you're inviting all of us to really try to bring to the industry and to bring to the conversation. As we wrap up this episode, there's going to be someone, at least one person listening to this episode, that feels as though you did in that moment with Flax, right? Flaxen. In that moment with him, just before you called Bob, and you had like 100 different scenarios in which you really felt like there wasn't space for your values, that there was only space for the outcome. And there's at least one person listening to this episode that feels as though they're in that situation, that they're being asked to compromise their values in order to either fast track or determine an outcome. What advice, if they're sitting in front of you right now, what would you say to them?
Call me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
Yeah, honestly, but also just there needs to be someone. You need to be able to feel comfortable saying that to someone who is going to support you, and maybe who's outside of all of those pressures, because sometimes it's difficult to talk to somebody who's also kind of been in a similar situation, but either somebody who has been there or somebody whose professional job it is to listen to you.
Yes.
I definitely would not be in the position I am right now if I didn't have Cecily and Bob and Valerie and my parents as people that I could go to with those things. If I had been on my own through that, especially without Cecily, I don't know that I would have decided to not nerve Flaxen.
Wow. Yeah.
Like I kind of needed them to be there for me in that moment, to be like, no, we're just not going to do that, because I really felt like I needed to do right by these other people who, had I asked them, they wouldn't have wanted me to, but who also I knew that they were really excited about going to the Olympics, you know?
So community, the people we surround ourselves by, and I love this saying, it says that you are the average of your 5 closest friends. And I've always thought about that because it makes me really think about who are you surrounding yourself around?
Yeah.
Are those people's values aligned with yours? And if they're not, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I end every episode asking the same 5 rapid fire questions. I'm really excited to hear your answers. If you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
Without a doubt, it would be Burn Your Goals. Joshua Metcalf is the author. It was one of the books that I read sort of during my downtime that really helped me figure out what I could focus on, because I was so focused on all of the things that were outside of my control. And so that book taught me what I could focus on that was within my control. And that made a huge, huge difference.
I need to read that book.
Yeah, it's very good.
Who is the most iconic horse in history?
So this may be a cop-out answer, but I kind of feel like we don't know. Like, it's a horse that's just out there that sacrificed a lot for somebody.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of horses that have done that. But I don't know that the most famous horses are necessarily the most iconic ones. Like, there have been a lot of horses in history that have sacrificed a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know, probably one of them.
What is the most undervalued skill as a rider?
I think probably one of 2 things. Either patience, partly because of all the pressure that we're under to get results and keep to our timeline and all that kind of stuff. Or self-reflection, because that's always hard.
Sure is. I think really often, like, really not regarded as how hard it is to self-reflect.
Yeah.
And then self-reflect publicly.
Yeah. And have that as a skill that benefits your training.
Who is the greatest horseman or horsewoman in history?
Again, I don't know that there is one. I know that for me, David O'Connor was a big influence, because as Cecily and I were kind of learning about the horsemanship world, I saw David experimenting with it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, this isn't just cowboys.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think as far as, for me personally, influentially,
Yeah.
I think David probably would be up there.
Well, and David was ground zero of, like, bringing those 2 worlds together in a lot of ways. And so I think we have a lot to thank him. Yeah. And like you said, like, like removing the veil and being like, this is not just cowboys or people in down pens, that this is something that applies to us all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last question, mares, stallions, or geldings?
I think it just depends on how much I want to be challenged that day.
Okay, tell me
There are
more.
some days where my patience is probably not where it could be, where I'm just going to go for the gelding first. Most of the time I would say a mare, because I really like sensitive horses. And mares always have a lot, not always, but most of the time have a lot to say. And it's easy for me to go with the flow. It's very difficult for me to make things happen. It's just kind of my energy. And so if I have a horse like, I mean, Alderwood isn't a mare, but he has a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
And so it's just more natural for me to just go with it. But I do also enjoy the challenge of working with stallions. I think that it's kind of like the martial artist part of me that loves a good sparring match. You know?
Yeah.
Not that I'm fighting with the stallions, but
it's a dance. It's a dance of a lot of energy and force with stallions.
Yes, it's the energy part of it that I really like, when I have the energy to play with their energy.
I'm going to actually leave a question. I'm going to, like, lob something here, because as you were answering the mare, stallions, or geldings question, you said, when I have the patience. I love how mares have a lot to say, and that I can't, if it's not about necessarily the outcome, that I have to, that I'm going to get a lot of feedback, right? And what a wonderful reflection of our conversation, that when anyone has a lot to say and has feedback for you, that is not necessarily going to make your outcome easier.
Right.
That it requires patience and understanding, but that the experience can be more rewarding.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's what we're going for.
That's what we're going for. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. It's fun.